C print just means that it's a color photograph. It's a chromagenic print. A chromagenic print is a light process. Happens on light-sensitive paper, and there are dye couplers on the paper that change into a dye everywhere that the silver gelatin has been exposed to light. It gets processed in complete darkness. It's a photograph. So this digital goes from a digital camera. Instead of being enlarged through a negative in an enlarger, it's just a digital enlarger using red, green, blue lasers. So that's what it is. They're mounted on panels that I make. Octagon cut out of wood, and then a piece of hardwood birch plywood glued onto the 2x4 supports, and then I cut this out on the table saw. Just seemed to be the easiest way to do that. I was inspired by Kathleen Lemoyne, fellow artist member here at the gallery, who cuts these shapes out. She uses a jigsaw, and I thought when I wanted to make round photographs, then I'm just going to get a jigsaw and I'll just carefully cut a circle out, you know? I've got the patience and concentration of a Zen master. I can do that. But no, it's really difficult to get that perfect circle with a jigsaw. So I found a better way to do it would be with a table saw. Just made a tray for the table saw that had runners on the bottom and was perfectly aligned with the blade, so I could push it back and forth and have it pin registered, so a hole in the middle of the panel, and then cutting all of the corners off of the octagon, pulling it back, cutting the next corner, pull it back, and keep cutting like that. Then you've got 16 corners to cut, then 32 corners to cut, and just keep cutting like that until you're turning that circle on the sawtooth is just shaving off that last little bit and making that perfect circle. It was really kind of satisfying, really kind of, I love the process, you know, going from that octagon to the circle. The print I was able to get sent to me already in a round format, so I didn't have to cut the print. I just had to make the support in the exact same shape as the print. Why are they round? I started thinking about changing format. That maybe I would get a bigger format camera, and if you have a lens from a smaller format, use it on a big format camera, then you might get something called vignetting, or shadows at the edge. I don't really have a traditional photo background. I did train in grad school in the color darkroom, but I originally had trained as a painter, so I didn't really have this sort of technical black and white darkroom approach. I started in color darkroom, very unorthodox sort of approach to it. So this idea of having shadows around the edges, that's great. Why would I want to prevent that, you know? So then I thought, well, I'll get a really small lens and use them in a big format, and I can make use of this image circle. The lens is round. It has this image circle that we always cut most of it out to get this rectangle from the middle. It just didn't prove to be economic getting all this new gear, right? So I just started making circles out of the rectangular image. I think that it changes sort of the relationship of the things in the photograph to the viewer. For the rectangle, we think of that window into another world, like we're going to step into that space. And I think the circle kind of changes that dynamic a little bit. I've got a set of ideas I've been working on for quite a long time. Our relationship to the environment. I usually speak about nature and technology, and back when I made mixed media work, the natural things would be represented by paint, the technology would be represented by photographs, and I would try to physically mix the two. Never satisfied with just paint on panel or paint on canvas. I always felt like I had to add something to it. So this made me start placing objects onto the panels. I started making assemblages. I started making sort of like shadow boxes, very influenced by Joseph Cornell, people like that, Bruce Conner, Ed Keenholz. But those things are awkward. They're difficult to hang. They're difficult to transport or ship. So I started using the camera to have that kind of assemblage or mixed media appearance or presence, but presented in the end as the finished piece being a photograph. So oftentimes those two things, the natural role, the technological role, they can switch. You know, it could be the paint is representing technology, like in that one over there, the pattern, the diagonal stripes. These are medieval patterns. It's over here too. This is kind of technology in a very primal sense, you know, on the battlefield in the Middle Ages, trying to figure out who it is that you're supposed to kill and not kill, who's on your team. The ones that have the diagonal stripes or the ones that have the red squiggles, you know, you can separate each other that way. So that is technology in a very primal sort of way. I like to collect things and make use of them before they go into the landfill. Like the television here. I found that in the neighborhood. Really exciting for me because it's got the rabbit ears. It's wonderful imitation wood grain on the plastic, you know. It's an old cathode ray tube television that who's going to want a CRT television? You've got all these nice flat screen TVs. Millions of these TVs are just being chucked into the environment. If I can take that television and make art out of it one more time, then I feel like I've maybe succeeded in doing something of value with it. But there it is sitting in my studio. It's going to be chucked eventually. Or maybe Pauline would like it. Television, you know, it's something that we thought we escaped from. We thought all those years we were going to kill our television. We should have done, and maybe we have done by now. No one's tuning into the 3 networks the way Elvis did. You know, Elvis had 3 TVs in the basement so he could watch each network at the same time. My wife and I were driving back from Houston recently. We stopped in Lake Charles to get a bite to eat in a pizza restaurant, and we were waiting for our pizza, and there were TVs all around the dining room, and they were turned to a different channel. Each one of them was didn't have the sound on, but the one that most of us were looking at, because there was no other way to not look at it, was a boxing match. And why are we watching people being violent to each other as we sit down and try to enjoy our wood-fired pizza? It seemed really bizarre to me. So, you know, younger generations of people, they're not really tuning into network television anymore. They're watching it on their laptop. They're getting Netflix or Amazon Prime. And we think maybe we've escaped from the television, but I don't think we have. I think the television has just broken out of its bounds, and it's gotten really small, and it's in everyone's pocket now, like this. I've got one too. I thought I got away from it, but it's with me all the time. So that's what this work is about, our relationship to our environment, our culture. The owl, you know, represents wisdom. Might be a good idea to put it in park, put our media in park. The architecture that you see in all of these pictures usually refers to our culture. You know, animals don't make architecture. Beavers build dams and ants make hills, but it's not that kind of permanent mark on the earth that people make. Very iconic example of architecture, the tower at Pisa. And this one over here is there to imply that our relationship to nature, our environment. It could be functional, it could be symbiotic. There are beautiful things that we do in our Western culture with our technology, but it's flawed at the same time. So that tower at Pisa stands there as this testament to beauty and knowledge, engineering, but it's a little bit crooked. It's not exactly right. There's something that's not right about it. So the animal on the farm equipment, it's turning the tables, changing the relationship, changing the dynamic, doing it over here with the ape on the car, the bull on the tractor. So those are basically what the ideas are about, mostly. I like for them to have a presence that looks more like a painting. You know, I do have a painting background, so I'm building them like paintings. I'm not using the camera in sort of a pure way. It's a very controlled environment in the studio. I can change it however I want to. I can shoot hundreds of frames, look at them, decide I don't like it, go back and change something else, shoot it 100 times more. There's probably 1,000 shots that went into getting this one just right. But everything is pretty much as you see it, was like it was shot in the studio that day. So they're from the camera. I don't do much editing. The editing that I do is mostly just to prepare it to print.
Matt, can you talk about that one a little bit more? Because it seems to stand out as different from the other images in the show, where you have at least a representation of an animal standing on top of a piece of technology, or you know, there's at least a reference to an animal, whereas the piece with the Paris eraser is a little different.
You're right. It is different for that reason, and it's different because it also doesn't have any projected image in it. It does have an animal, just we don't realize it because we're so close to this octopus tentacle. You had no idea it was an octopus tentacle. But that's okay. You don't need to see the octopus tentacle to feel it. You felt it. You didn't know what it was, but you felt it. This is an eraser that we got in Paris years ago, and it's been hanging around the studio. It's one of those things that accumulates over time. The Paris eraser, play on words, what would it mean to erase Paris? Are we erasing Paris? Paris, the Eiffel Tower, you know, it was this achievement of art and engineering, and it is an achievement of our Western culture. Are we destroying it? Are we tearing it apart? What if we hold out of the Paris Agreement? Would we erase our participation? So this is why Paris Eraser is in the show.